It is time for another data miner kata.
Right, marketing quickly. Give me a trumpet. Give me a trumpet. Na 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 na! Because this is a big one. Hello and welcome to Bringing the Thunder. We're doing another kata, and as I said, it's a huge one. It's an amazing one. If you have been if you have been excited as I am about DevOps, then this is the one to follow, because this is really going to show us how we can use DevOps in the real world. I have with me today to help me do this, or to actually show all of us, Michiel Oda. Hello.
Hello.
So, Michiel, tell me a little bit about yourself. Who are you and what do you do at Skyline?
Yes, I am Michiel Oda. I work here as a senior DevOps engineer at Skyline for 7.5 years already, I think.
Okay.
I am part of the data acquisition team, so my main focus currently is the CI/CD and Validator tools, so all the DevOps environment around it actually. So currently today will be Validator, because that's a core concept of the entire DevOps.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, because the topic today, indeed, as you mentioned, it is the validator. So the validator for connectors or protocols, drivers, depending on how old you are. But we're going to be showing you how you can contribute to the actual source code of the validator, which is really exciting because all of that is incorporated in a CI/CD pipeline. It's got DevOps behind it, and it allows us to actually use it for what it's intended for. The whole entire DevOps community can actually work together and add new checks, add additional validation to the validator that runs within DIS. What is the validator exactly in DIS? Because I've explained it a little bit now, but is there anything else you can...
Well, the validator main function or original function was to validate the XML that was being developed. Nowadays, we also implement some checks for the C# for like with Roslyn and so on.
Right.
But the bulk of that is still about the XML because it's so big. There's so many things in there. It's a lot easier to make a mistake in there. Everyone is human. Even I still make mistakes. It happens every day. And having a validator to make sure that everything is okay, that nothing crashes when you upload that connector on Data Miner is a great help.
Right.
So the validator currently is actually outside DS nowadays. Previously it was only inside. Now we actually extracted that, so we can actually use that now in the CI/CD pipelines.
Right.
But DS still actually uses that validator to keep the same functionality. But now we can actually have other people contribute it a lot more easily to actually give more and more value to it.
Excellent. So indeed, because we're using now, we're talking about the standard connectors. So previous kata we had on scripted connectors, which was something really easy and quick to do. A standard connector is a lot more complicated, but it is excessively, extremely valuable and flexible. You can do pretty much anything you can think of with it. But because of that, the validator is an amazing tool to make sure that even though it is that flexible, we have something automated that can stop things from, okay, this attribute probably doesn't work well with this or this and that. So that's the validator. But you've got an exercise for us.
Yeah.
And it's not just running the validator, it's...
No, it's actually contributing to
the validator. Yes. Okay, well, should we jump in?
Yeah,
All
definitely.
right, let's have a look what you've got for us.
Okay, so first off, we have a special repository on GitHub, because that's where the location is of our validator nowadays.
Yes.
So it's called Skyline Data Miner CI/CD Validators Exercise.
Okay.
So you can find that here. If you remove the exercise, so we have just .validators, and that's the actual validators repository.
All right, so there's two repositories.
Yeah, so for the exercise, we will work on this one, so that everyone can easily contribute, and it remains the same. But then we have the actual validators repository, where people can then create their own checks and so on, and add to it. So it's just separation for make it ourselves.
Okay, so a little bit sandboxed here. That means people can play around with it, so everyone can follow along with the exercise. We'll be using this repository for the exercise, but I'll give you more information at the very end. If you actually follow the exercise, you will also be able to do something on the real validator.
Yes.
That will give you a lot more DevOps points, but stick around, I'll tell you about that later. So we're going to use the exercise. So what is our first step here? What do we do? Are there any prerequisites?
Well, for sure you need to have a development environment. So we will be using Visual Studio. Then you also need to have at least .NET 6 SDK installed.
Okay.
have a GitHub account, because
Right.
you need to be able to fork it
Right.
and then actually open the code with Visual Studio. So those
Yes.
are the basic necessities, at least, that I can think of.
Okay, all right, great. Can people see that somewhere if they want to have an overview of the exercise?
So
or-
where is it? Yeah, here.
All right, then our docs.
Yeah, so we have in our documentation, so if you just go to the start, we have our data miner tutorials, we have our data miner integration, our DS tutorials, and then here we will see, hey, contributing to the validator code.
Okay,
So it's just go there, and it will also explain already what we will do. We'll also highlight the two different repositories, so the exercise and the real one.
excellent. Okay, well, we've seen the docs, we've seen the prerequisites. Let's jump in. What's
Yeah.
the first step we want to do if we want to contribute to, in this case, the validator exercise?
Yes. So first, we want to make sure that we can actually work on this repository, but this repository is owned by us.
Yes.
As a code owners, we are a part of it. So if you want to contribute to that, first need to make a fork of that. That's a GitHub terminology, or
Okay.
Git terminology, I think. So you can just here click on fork. So it will say, hey, fork your own copy.
Right.
It will basically create a copy on your name.
On your own as an owner then, yes.
Just create fork. GitHub will do all the things. So give it a few seconds, and automatically you will get then a copy basically of what the current state is of that repository.
All right.
So we have this here. Next up, we have here a green button. For me, it's green. For others, it can be a different color depending on your
Your
teaming support
teaming
in
support.
GitHub. Yes.
You mean the code button? Okay.
The code button, but it's always a distinctive color, which makes it easy to catch your eye on it. If you have Visual Studio installed, you will see here an option Open with Visual Studio.
Okay.
If you don't see that, then you'll need to do some manual cloning and so on, but
Okay.
there's online documentation about that on how you do that. It's
Right.
just a regular kit. But if you have Visual Studio, it's a lot easier. You just click on it, you click Open with a pop-up, and you see Visual Studio starting up.
Excellent.
This will then suggest, like, hey, where do you want to store this code locally? So by default, I have my settings set up, so it's always under folder GitHub. And then I click clone. It will automatically clone and give it a few seconds, and it will get there.
All right, so it's grabbing the validator source code from the exercise repository on GitHub, and it's cloning that into your own setup now so that we can then work on it.
Yeah,
Okay.
indeed.
So I see it's finished cloning almost.
Yeah.
Great.
So currently, this is now an exact copy of everything that's in the validator. Of course, we need to start somewhere. It's quite big as well. So first, we need to create our checks, our error messages, before we actually start developing.
Right.
We made that easier by creating a tool. So we have our validator management tool.
Okay.
There are a few ways to actually start. You can either right-click on the project and set as startup project.
Okay.
Or what you can also do is at the top, select as well here.
Yes,
Maybe a
select
bit
it there.
easier to see as well. So make sure you select that one, then you just run it. So
Okay.
in the meantime, it will build the solution, build that project, and open the tool then as well.
Okay. So that's going to open up the management tool, and in this exercise we're going to be adding a new check to the validator.
Indeed.
What can you tell us a little bit about what you're going to be adding? What is missing in validator that we want to add?
Yeah. In this scenario, we will be adding a check on the decimal stack inside a parameter. And for the
Okay.
specific scenario where your parameter is a date time or a date parameter.
Right.
The reason for that is by default, DataMiner stores only 6 decimals in the database, but for the
Alright.
date time, 8 decimals are needed for the accuracy.
Aha.
And accuracy is very important, of course, in our business.
Yes.
So we want to make sure that people correctly use those type of parameters.
Right. So if you have a connector and it's got a parameter which is a date time, you know, something showing the date or the time, you're going to want to have decimals 8 instead of the standard decimal 6, so the accuracy is correct.
Yes, indeed.
Great. So we're going to be adding that check. I see the management tool has finished
Yes.
opening, so
So it's a rather plain tool. It's not super fancy, but it does its job.
it does what it has to
It
do.
does what it has to do. So this contains all the checks and all the error messages. So you can see the categories and then how many checks and how many error messages are in there. We want to add a new one because
Yes.
it doesn't exist yet. So we just click here, add check. It will open a new pop-up window. This is to create the first error message as well
Right.
as have the option to create extra checks as well.
Okay.
Generally, we always go top to bottom. It's the easiest way. So we first have our category. The category, give it a second because it's a bigger list, is a list of all the main categories that we use. So we have our protocol for tags directly under protocol.
We're
have
gonna
param.
need param, I'm guessing.
Yes, this is quite an obvious one. Then we have namespace. This contains all the kind of XPaths, but then translated in C#.
Yeah, the locations in the XML of your connectors.
So if we go to protocol param display,
yes,
you see there is no decimals yet.
No.
Because it doesn't exist yet, so we will create a new namespace.
Okay.
So you click this button.
And then you can fill one in.
Yeah. So Skyline. So we start with protocol, because that's the main tag, and then we just go deeper.
So you're pretty much, if you have a connector XML open, we're following kind of the tags, the XML tags,
indeed.
all the way down up to decimals.
Because then you have always a unique identifier of, hey, this check, because, for example, a check ID attribute, there's quite a lot of them already.
Okay.
So it's helpful to know where it is actually.
Excellent.
So we add that. So then you can see now, hey, we have our display decimals
And we can select
namespace. Of course, there are no checks in there. It's an empty list. So we'll again add a new check. And this is then the name of the main check that can contain multiple error messages.
Okay.
We generally have a kind of standard syntax for it. So we always start with check, and then the name of the tag or the attribute. So in this case, decimals. Oh, decimals.
Right.
And then specifying its tag or an attribute, because we have sometimes tags and attributes that have the same name.
Okay.
To make it clear.
So, and again, making it unique as an identifier. So now we can probably add the check
Yes.
with that name. Cool.
Next up is the error message name.
Alright.
This is to be used within the C#, so that it's easily to be reading or easily read for the developer as well to see like, okay, this is the actual error that I'm sending, so
Okay.
let's not call it A, B, C, give it a proper name.
Okay.
So in this case, we have the invalid tag, or invalid, decimals for daytime. Oh.
Okay, so pretty much, again, describing what we're going to be checking, what the problem is, just a way to make it clear when you're then developing. Because where we're halfway now, let me keep you going. Let me keep you going.
Yeah.
I won't interrupt. Keep going.
No problem. So then we have our description. So the description is what's being shown in the DS Validator window. So it needs to be readable as well. To have some consistency between all the checks, all the error messages that we have, we also use templates. So we can use those. It will show a drop down of all the templates.
Okay.
There's a lot of placeholders in there. It's again to be flexible, but to have a same structure for everything.
Right.
So in this scenario, we have, for example, a missing tag. We miss that decimals with that correct value or with that expected value. We actually already have such a
there's
scenario.
a few in there. Missing tag 0, missing tag 0 and 1, and so on and so forth. So I guess we pick one of those.
Yeah, we will pick on with the expected value because we know that already up front.
We want decimal 8.
Yes, it's the one question about it. It needs to be that. So
Okay.
we know that up front. Now you can see we have some parameters. So like for people that are familiar with the string format type, this is the same principle. So you need to replace the 0, 1, 2, and 3 with something. So we have two columns here. The left column is the name of the argument in the C# code because that error message will be translated to a C# object or method.
Okay, I will interrupt because you're saying it now. This tool, what does it actually do? Because we're now going through everything, but I'm gonna guess it does something.
In the end, indeed, we save all our error messages to an XML just for storage.
Okay.
Because that's what you see in the background then when you open it.
Okay.
And at the end, we will generate some code. So this will pre-generate the error messages, the template kind of for the check, and also already the unit tests.
Right. So this is pretty much a UI that allows you to do a whole bunch of code generation in this repository just to make everyone's life easier.
Yep.
So once we've gone through that, we've pretty much done 80% of the work almost because it's generated.
The administrative part of it, like I would call it, is done.
Okay.
The actual code itself of checking you need to do.
Yes.
But at least the units are there that you then don't need to create, just need to fill in and so on.
All right.
To make it easier as well to indeed start on it.
Okay, well, let's continue then. So
Yes.
the description parameters, we need to fill a few of those in because we know them, I think.
Yeah, so we have also the option to already pre-fill
Yeah.
some of those placeholders basically.
Yeah, like
because we already know.
expected value is going to be decimals 8.
Yeah, so that's going to be the value S8 because that's what the value is inside the tag. The tag name, we generally, because it's in the category param, we just then use the tags after that one.
Okay.
So we know it's in the display decimals.
All right. Okay.
So missing tag, display decimals with an expected value 8 for item kind, item ID. We know it's for a parameter, so we can actually fill in param. This is the most common used one. We can also sometimes have table or column, but as you can see, you can fill in whatever you want. And then the ID itself. ID is always going to be variable. We don't know that up front.
So that one is stays variable, but you know it's going to be an ID of a parameter.
Yes.
So we can do a param ID there.
Yes. So this makes it more readable for the developers as well. So it's not a random item ID, but it's clearly param ID. So
I'm following.
Yeah. Then we have our source. So this is being used as for the validator, the main just regular validate button that you can see.
Okay.
And yes, we also have the compare button. So to compare two versions of a connector to see if there's any breaking changes. That's the major change checker, which we'll not cover today.
Right.
So for now, we will just use the validator.
Yep.
Then severity. Severity, we have a few of those. The first 4 are the important ones. The other ones are actually very specific scenarios or are not really used.
Okay.
We have the default severities that you see in data miner. We have critical, major, minor, and warning.
Right, so we got to pick one of those.
Yes. More about that information you can also find then as well in the documentation. I will not go over every severity. In our scenarios, we will pick a major because it does not break data miner, but it can give incorrect results if you want to use it.
Okay, good.
Certainty is how sure is the data miner, is the validator itself that this error is actually an error.
Okay.
Sometimes, especially if very vague or variable scenarios, it's not always clear. So we give uncertain to say like, double check this.
Right, a notice to the developer to, hey, this might be wrong, you should check it. But in this case, I guess...
In this case, we really know what it is, so we will pick certain.
Yeah, if it's wrong, it's wrong.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then we also have the fixed impact. Fixed impact, breaking or non-breaking. Some changes actually changes something on data miner when you upload that new version. In this scenario, it will actually only fix things. It will improve stuff. So we count this as a non-breaking issue.
Okay.
Then we have has code fix. There's a lot of options.
Yes. But
sometimes in the validator, if you maybe already noticed that, is you have like a small icon to the right of it. Some of them have to. And if you right click, you can then actually fix that error. Yeah. So then the validator will automatically fix that error if possible.
Yes.
Technically, we could do that. Okay. But again, we will not cover that today. We will just focus on just adding a simple validator.
Right. Keeping it simple, trying to, going through the basics here.
But the code fix is also possible in the future to be added to say like, hey, automatically add that tag with that specific value.
Okay.
Then we have some other fields. Those are more optional. How to fix, pretty explanatory, like how do you fix it? Just a simple text line. We have some example code of showing how it should be. And then details. Details is more important in here, I would say, because details is then translated into the info icon on the validator UI. You click that open, and then it shows a box.
Oh, right. So it's in the validator UI and DIS itself, where the details one is going to be the one that you.
Yeah, you can then actually open that error message to read about
information.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we will first start with how to fix. Simple.
All right.
Add the protocol.
Yeah.
Decimals.
Well, we can probably fill in some placeholders, right, for this exercise, or do we want to?
We can go quickly through it. Indeed.
Yeah.
So.
Because I think on the docs we can probably find the exact.
Yes.
The exact things there. So either we copy from there maybe, or we can. We can just fill in some placeholders there.
Let me quickly copy the example code and the.
Right, so for people following along, you can do the same, of course, have a look in the docs. A lot of what we're going to be typing and writing can actually be copy-pasted from there, save you some time.
Okay.
All right, great.
So this is then filled in. Everything is here. for now we will ignore those checkboxes at the left side. That's more an advanced scenario again.
All right.
But for most of the checks, almost everything, you don't really need this.
Okay, so pretty much we've got this. So I'm gonna guess if you click add, it will then start doing code generation, or not yet?
No, because if you want to add multiple error messages, you don't always constantly want to generate everything.
Right, so you could add more than one, and then
yes,
probably at the bottom there.
Yeah, so now it says, hey, the XML file is outdated, so it doesn't automatically save it as well, like if you make a mistake to reduce it. So first we save the XML file, and then it's just say, hey, saving done. This is also useful if you want to add multiple error messages and then go back and forth sometimes, so you don't lose your progress. Correct. If you're finished with everything, so in our case, we're done.
Yes.
We have the button generate code.
Okay, so this is where the magic happens.
Yeah, and that's already done. It's super quick.
The magic is fast.
Magic, it's blazing fast.
But
it's
powerful.
like data miner.
But powerful.
But
okay.
powerful.
So it generated a whole bunch of code now in our repository.
Yeah.
And I can already, or I could already see there if you...
Yeah, so you have git changes. You can actually find that. I think it's under the view
git
changes.
Git changes, yeah.
Which will open a tool window, and actually it shows just everything that has been changed. Okay. So we can see, hey, we have multiple check decimal stack files been created.
That were added in the right locations.
Yeah. One of them is under the error messages, so that is fully auto-generated, as you can see at the top. So this contains basically the error message that you have created.
Okay.
Let me also increase a bit the size, so it's a bit more readable.
Yeah.
So this creates all the error messages, and like you see here, we have our invalid decimals for datetime, which contains, for example, the argument param ID that we added here.
Yeah, so those are the things we indeed filled in the wizard, pretty much.
Then, when you develop, it's a good principle to have test-driven development. First start with creating your unit test and then go onward from there. Because if you have your unit test ready, then you know this is a situation that I need to tackle, and then you can continuously develop, run the unit test, see what you are still missing.
So pretty much make an example of what's wrong, make an example of what's right, and have some tests that run that, even before you might have your logic.
Indeed.
That's TDD and in a nutshell, pretty much.
Yeah, that's TDD.
Start red, green, red, I think I remember. First make it fail.
Yeah,
no, you don't want it red again.
No. You make it first
fail,
red, so it fails, and then gradually you improve your code until everything is green.
You don't end up with red. That would be...
not so great.
Okay, so I'm going to guess then our first step is going to be adding those things. So we're going to look at what's a valid situation, what's an invalid situation, and probably fill those in those XML files. I see they were added automatically.
Indeed. So those XML files, so for it's always going to generate a valid, and then for every error message, create a specific XML file as well. So it already tries to fill in some tags based on the namespace. So it's just to help you out a little bit, but of course we want to add a bit more to it.
Yes.
As we know, we need to have a param ID. So we specify, for example, parameter ID 10.
Just an identifier, yes.
And this is a valid scenario, so we want to make sure that it actually matches up. So we know, hey, decimals 8 need to be there.
Yes.
But of course, this needs to be for a specific type of parameter. So we add our measurement. Right,
because we mentioned the parameter has to be one of a date-time type. So, the date-time type, oh boy. Wow, should have picked a different exercise, man. Date-time type. So it's a number as a type, because that's the internal. It's just a numeric value, but with the option date-time, if you're familiar with connector development, that's how you make or specify such a parameter.
Yes.
So this is a valid scenario now.
This is a perfect valid scenario. As you can see, this parameter is very short. It doesn't have a name or a description. But all that is not necessary.
No, it's valid for our use case here.
Yes. We reduce the size as much as possible because it's easier to maintain and to specify on what you actually are validating. Okay,
so now that's the good one.
Yeah.
Now make the bad one.
Yeah. The easiest way to do this is just copy-paste because generally...
And then break it.
And then basically break it.
And then break it.
So in this scenario, we just need to remove the decimal stack, for example.
Yes.
So it can easily be done like that.
Okay, so this is then in the invalid situation, the one that we want to make the check for, that automatically validates it. This is the invalid one where we expect our exception. Yeah. Okay, so we've got probably then the red situation, or
Almost.
something missing.
Yeah. So if we go to the C# file itself under the protocol test, here you will see a list of all the validate message. We also validate the error message itself in case the description changes and so on by accident. You want to catch that. And then we also have some extra checks for a tag later on that we'll see, or an attribute.
Okay.
As you can see, they are ignored by default. This is also a bit more of a remnant of the DS times of the validator.
Okay. But yeah, we can probably unignore them.
Yeah, we can easily unignore them. That's also the very first step normally. So we just make sure everything is unignored.
Right, so all of those new checks that we added, this is the actual code that executes the check, and we want them to actually run. So unignore everything.
Yeah, so as you can see, this has also been made quite generic and as small as possible to be very easy of use. So generally, the only thing you need to do is, and the expected results, add the error messages that you expect from to be thrown.
That's already in there. We just need to uncomment it?
Uncomment it and change it a little bit, because by default, damn it, but there we go. By default, it will just fill in with the argument name because it doesn't know the invalid parameter ID, for example. But we know this was parameter 10 that we put in there.
All right, because you filled that in the valid and invalid one.
Yes, indeed. Those first 3 arguments, you can ignore those for the unit test because those are not needed. Those are needed for then, for example, the validator UI or some functionality within the S.
Okay, so we can ignore those.
Just those are not necessary. You don't need to worry about it. The unit test will not fail on those or something.
Okay.
They will just be ignored. So we expect now an error message, one of them, for parameter ID 10.
Right.
Now, a nice thing in Visual Studio is you can right-click and say, hey, run tests.
And then you will run just those tests?
Well, that's something you need to take in account. Depending on where you right-click and run test, you will have run multiple or only one test. If you do this within a one test method, it will run that test method. So if you do it in a test class, it will run only the class. If you do it within the file, in the namespace, for example, then it will run everything in there.
Ah, okay.
So that's quite useful to know. So I just click run test, and you will see it will build it, run it, and then create or test those files.
Yeah, currently our valid scenario should also fail, pretty much.
No.
Because we have no logic in there?
We have no logic, so there is no errors thrown at all. So the valid will always succeed by default.
Right, it's the invalid one that's gonna...
The invalid always should fail.
Yes.
If the invalid doesn't fail at first time, then there is already something going very, very wrong.
Okay.
But should not happen if you
If that happens, go back to step 1.
Basically, yes.
All right.
So as you can see, there are some failures. So at the top, you can also have an easy way actually to just see the failed ones.
Yeah, as expected that we should have some failures there.
So we have our invalid one, so say like, hey, we expected one result because we defined that, but we found only 0, and then also some extra information on what the one that we expected.
Nice. So now we have a nice, robust framework around unexisting code, because we need to write it. But now at least we generally start writing code until it goes green.
Yes, indeed.
That's the basics.
So for that, we go to our test or our check itself.
Okay.
So in the test folder, we have again another check decimal stack.
Right.
And this contains the actual full check. By default, this is also commented out, again a bit of a remnant. But you start with uncommenting that, to actually recognize it as a proper validator check.
Okay, right. So the generated code, again, it has some things ignored, it has some things in comments. Those just need to be changed, toggled, swapped.
It can be useful if you start creating a check and then halfway need to already kind of merge it or finish it. You just can uncomment it and then start later on with that process.
And also mentions it in the Go there, please comment out the interfaces that aren't used together.
Yeah.
So that's the next step, I'm guessing.
So we have the check that inherits 3 different interfaces. So that's the 3 different functionalities. We have our validate, we have our code fix, like I mentioned, and we also have our compare if it's a major change checker.
We're just doing one.
We will just doing one. So we can just select those. Control KC, that's a shortcut in Visual Studio. You also have those buttons here to actually comment your site with code.
So comment that out.
And then what I do, as of a clean code a bit that I like, is just take those and double comment them out as well, because that's generally the code style that is recommended.
And what is that you just uncommented? The actual
The actual methods, the fix and compare method.
which we are not doing here.
Yes.
We're just doing the validate, which is the first one. I'm guessing every code we write in there is then the actual code that the validator
Yes,
runs
indeed.
to check. To speed that up, we have all of that in the docs as well.
Yeah, indeed.
So just to show that, I think what we should do is probably grab it from there. If you're following along, you can do the same. We'll probably have a quick go through the code though.
Yeah, definitely.
That you do understand what you just copy pasted. It's not a virus. Even if it were, it would just be in a sandbox, so it's fine.
Double check that again. That's the entire method, yes.
Right, so I think from the docs we can plop, magically put some code in there.
Yes.
Saves us a bit of time of having to type it in, but maybe let's go over some of that stuff, what we're doing in there.
Yeah. So we have some useful methods within our validator to make everyone's life easier. So we start in the validate with the validator context. Because generally every check is we loop over every parameter and we only validate the ones with the valid ID, because we have a separate check for the invalid ones.
Right.
So we have just, hey, for each parameter with a valid ID, do this check.
Okay, so we loop through every parameter in a connector, the ones that already have a valid identifier in there. If it doesn't have a valid identifier,
Then
it's
we will-
handled somewhere else.
Yeah, that's a separate error and we ignore those.
Excellent, so looping through that.
Then we use the early return pattern, how it's called, so to make sure that we don't end up with that we need to have a scroll bar basically to the right infinitely. We make sure that we early return always. So we first check, hey, is this a number parameter? Because if not, then there is no point in checking further.
Right.
So we do all certain steps like that.
So that was the, if you remember the XML we made in the valid, I'm guessing that's the, I know that's the type number.
Yeah.
So is
Type
number
number, yeah.
pretty much checks that, okay.
Indeed.
If it isn't a number, we don't care.
Yeah. Then we will look further in the measurement type tag. Are there any options at all?
Right.
If there are none, then we skip it. If there are, then we check, hey, is it a date, daytime, or a different option, daytime with minute?
Right.
See if that one is in there, in that options.
Yeah, so those are the three options there currently. For that, I would personally recommend you check the docs
Yeah.
for what constitutes as a daytime parameter, or if you're developing any other check the docs to make sure you are aware of all the syntax things in there.
Yeah.
So, okay, we're checking all the possible cases there.
Yeah.
And then,
If we found out that it is actually a daytime parameter,
right.
and then we also check, hey, the decimal stack. If the decimal stack is not 8, then we will throw our error, or add the error actually to the results.
Right. That's the actual.
That's the actual place where
Yeah.
now the check is happening. So we first do some other things at first to make sure that we don't do
So
unnecessary coding.
we've pretty much filtered out the right parameter,
Yeah,
the one we
indeed.
are expecting decimals 8. Then we do the check, does it have decimals 8? If it doesn't, I'm seeing there results.add, we're adding a result,
Yes.
which is an error.
Error. So if you type error, let me quickly show you. You will see a list of only what is actually in that namespace. So that's
Right.
part of the,
IntelliSense gives you some
Yeah.
options there. Okay.
with all the generation and configuration that we did, it made sure that you only see the errors for that specific check.
Okay.
Makes it a lot easier. Then you need to pass some arguments. So for example, we have our test. So we just say, hey, this thing where we are in, we pass along with it. Then our reference node. Our reference node is necessary for the code fix.
All right.
But out of good habits, we just always add it. And generally, if it's a check within a parameter, we always specify the reference node as the parameter itself.
Okay, so just making sure that the parameter is in there so that it knows the error can have a link where you click
that
on
specific.
it, it'll go to that parameter.
Not necessarily for clicking. It's
Ah.
for something else. The next node, the position node, is for the navigate to or
Right,
the double click
okay,
on the
that
validator.
one.
Yeah. So there's two different ones.
I see.
This is to link it to a specific parameter, which can be used in another part, like with the example with the code fix. And the position node is when you navigate
Okay.
to that location.
So the first one is optional currently, but we probably just added anyway already.
Yeah,
okay.
because if we later on add a code fix, then we don't need to search through the other error messages to see like, hey, has it been forgotten or is it correct?
Okay.
It's a kind of a habit mostly.
Nice. Okay, well, okay, yeah.
And then we end off with, of course, the ID of the parameter. We always expect a string because it's easier to do with that code. So
Yeah.
that's why we also have the param.id, which will return a nullable event.
Okay.
Instead of doing always to string and etc., we just have also the .raw value, which will take just the
Right.
value from the XML and use that one.
Okay, but a lot of those you can figure out as you're typing it. IntelliSense
Yes.
gives you that. There's documentation on that, and even if not, then
There's
we'll
plenty
probably
of other checks and error messages throughout the
Yeah.
validator. You can always have a sneak peek and how the other checks are done
Yeah.
to be a bit more consistent.
monkey see, monkey do.
Kind
Okay.
of.
Okay, so we've got the code. So I'm guessing if you now rerun those tests,
Yes.
if
So
everything went right, they should be green.
let's make sure that we run all the tests, not just the failed ones.
Yes.
So let's run the test again.
All right.
And normally, if everything is all right, all those red ones should be removed, and you will see here 5 green ones then.
Okay. Okay. Moment of truth. Drum roll. Drum roll. More drum rolling. Speeding up the drum roll.
Yes, it takes a bit of time to actually build everything and load up because it's already getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So the more errors we add, the longer it takes. But the good thing is the unit tests are not really an issue.
All right. Looks like we missed one. Something is still
Indeed.
invalid there. So let's have a look at what we're missing there. All right.
Still, wait.
Let's have a look. Maybe from the copy pasting, I probably made them screw up now.
Maybe. Where is this issue now? So we made sure that it's a number. Or it's an invalid one. We know it's daytime. This is the correct syntax. But maybe
Yes.
let me double check, just to be sure that we didn't make any mistakes.
All right.
So we have options daytime number,
Yeah.
param ID 10.
Yeah, it
Here
should
it
be
has
right.
displayed through, this RT display true, not necessarily necessary, but
Okay.
for good measures, I will just maybe add it as well. But that should be the correct one.
Okay. Okay.
Let's run the specific one again.
So it might be that. Just
Might be that there's some weird codes in there that actually make sure that the behavior of the display tag is a little bit different. But as we see now, actually, they all succeeded.
All
So
right.
actually, there's a
So
small thing.
okay. So there was a thing in there in the background where it also checks if your parameter is displayed or not.
Yeah, maybe I'll have a closer look as well. Maybe
Okay.
then update that docs a little bit to make sure it's more robust as well.
Right. Okay. But pretty much, so we've got the code now. But how do I now give
Yeah.
that code? So that's
So now
the
you
next
have
part.
everything here in your Visual Studio. Now you need to make sure you commit that and then eventually push that
Yeah.
and then create a pull request. So those are the
Okay.
3 main steps. Inside Visual Studio, so you have here your git changes. You can just say, click here on that button, stage all. So that prepares them to be committed via Git to
Yeah.
then
Yeah.
the local repository.
Okay.
So we say, hey, added the decimals check.
Yeah, this is very similar, if you're watching this, very similar to Kata 1, where we showed you how you could do a pull request, how you could do, that's
Yeah.
pretty much what we're doing now again. So we can commit everything, we can push it,
Indeed.
it'll end up on your forked repository. Again, everything in Kata 1 will show you that. And then we're gonna make a pull request.
Yeah, and you have some options in that. With the latest Visual Studio, you
Okay.
actually can create one inside Visual Studio, or you can go to the browser online and UI and
Okay.
see it there.
Because indeed, I think it actually, well, so we committed and pushed it now. So within Visual Studio, how would we do that then? Or
We can just, hey, click here in Visual Studio. So this is the newest option.
all right, and then in there you could say, okay, let's make a pull request.
Yeah. So then you can just also give here again a text or the title of the pull request. Added decimals. You can also give some more description to explain what you've done or etc. In this case, I think we just can leave it empty. Maybe it still needs something.
No, it does. It looks like you need to fill something in there. Nope.
Nope. You know what? Let's go to the UI, to the browser.
Visual Studio is the newest thing.
It's very new. I haven't really used it myself yet that much, so I need to figure it out myself.
Again, my fault for asking you to try it with Visual Studio.
No problem. But either way, it's possible. If people figure it out, then it's amazing.
Let us
but
know.
in the meantime,
Let us know. Yeah,
know.
send a mail to thunder@sky.be if you figure out how it works in Visual
Yes.
Studio.
but otherwise, let's
for
go to
GitHub,
the more
yeah.
traditional way. As you have here the button contribute,
Right.
because that always
okay.
shows up with the with a fork.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe let's refresh as well, so that it actually realizes that it got some changes.
Mm-hmm.
So you can see, hey, now we are one commit ahead of the main repository. So you can have here a button open pull request.
Okay.
It will automatically compare the branches, and then you will see, hey, this is all the code that we have done in this commit.
Yeah.
Select create pull request. We can, it by default uses the last one
Sure.
of the commits. And if we just keep it like that, we can just say, hey, create pull request.
Great.
So now this has been made already, pull
Yeah.
request is there.
So pretty much what happens now is this pull request gets sent to the owners of the repository, which in this case is going to be us. And we can have a look at the code that you added. If it's great, we'll merge it and it'll end up in the actual validator, which will be then in the next DIS release.
Yes.
And now, if you do that, you can do all of that with the exercise. The exercise will automatically close that pull request, similar to what we did with the kata 1, and will get your exercise, and you'll be getting some fabulous DevOps points. But here's the big thing, because on the actual validator, maybe you can
Yes.
show, on the actual validator repository, we actually added 5 missing things, 5 tasks that we've had on the backlog for a while that we would really like to tackle. And we are inviting the entire DevOps community to help us tackle those. Some of those I've checked actually happen in some of the connectors that our DevOps community is making. So if you make that, those issues will be found beforehand. So if you grab one of those, if you did the tutorial, do the same thing with one of those. Well, okay, with different code, of course. But if you do that, you'll be getting, what was it? I think 750 DevOps points.
That's pretty nice.
It is pretty big. So have a look at that, figure that out. If you can do one of those instead of just the exercise, which you can also do, I recommend doing it. That'll give you a lot of extra DevOps points. Why? Because this is the essence of DevOps. This is one of the big reasons why we've been doing all of these katas, all of these exercises. Get your hands dirty, help the community develop together on one solution that can assist everyone. It will help you as well because you don't need to wait on someone else to do it. If you say this is an issue, we happen to get that a lot in our connectors, write the check yourself. You can do it. You don't need to wait on anyone. It's your priority list. If it's at the top of your list, grab the code, have a go at it, make a pull request, and we'll figure things out for you. Okay. So for the exercise, no screenshots this time. You can just do the pull request. We'll get your DevOps points ready for you. Michiel, thank you very much for making some time. I'll shake your hand, man.
Thanks for having me.
Nice exercise. Everyone following along, thank you very much for following along with this one and with all other katas. I'm doing it. If you're watching on YouTube, make sure to ring that bell and subscribe so you can catch all the next ones. And yeah, I'll see you on the next one then. Good luck.